Melinda writes in, she says, can you tell us more about what specific practices, supplements, or dietary changes work best to help children with autism? And what do you think is causing the increase in autism specifically? Do you think it is the increased use of glyphosate, neonicotinoid pesticides, or what?
So dietary changes for kids on the spectrum in general, I find them most of them to be sensitive to gluten, dairy, and often soy.
Okay.
I take those foods out. Occasionally corn, but to start, if you can start with the gluten and dairy, you're going to do them a world of good.
Mm-hmm.
For kids on the spectrum, I also find them to be nutrient deficient. So if you can start them on a children's multivitamin and mineral, if you don't have access to an integrated practitioner, yes.
Mm-hmm.
They often need probiotics because their microbiome, the germs in their gut are imbalanced. So starting a kid's probiotic or the fermented foods that we talked about can also be helpful.
Okay.
What I think is causing epidemic, boy, I could get the Nobel Peace Prize and retire. But I think it's multifactorial.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one thing.
Right.
I think they have something called cytokine storm, where they have this massive immune response. And I believe that what's triggering those responses are environmental. There may be epigenetic changes that they have inherited from mom and dad, by the way. Dad also passes on his exposures from pesticides, working the fields, whatever dad's been exposed to, automotive industry, to children as well. And mom, it's obvious, whatever she's been taking in,
mm-hmm.
that those changes can affect. So the baby's born, perhaps with some issues to begin with. They often have methylation defects that I mentioned prior. And then when you load on plastics, let's say the flame retardants, we're all 100% positive here in the great state of California. Those are particularly nasty. Compounds like benzene, we had a fire here in California. Benzene's now in the water in Santa Rosa. Compounds like styrenes, not so good. And then parabens, they're just about in every kid's product you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not to mention the EMFs from cell phones, routers, etc.
Right.
Their water, their food, heavy metals, exposures from mom's teeth. Gosh, I have a mouth of mercury myself. I can only imagine what my son inherited. It's usually more in the first child. And
you got to get those taken out.
Oh, I've been trying. I was blessed with a very high level of silver. Thank you so much. Working on it for 60 years.
Okay.
And so, so this is sort of, I think it's multifactorial. I think it's environmental toxins for sure, along with a sprinkle of epigenetics and toxic exposures to the parents and grandparents, by the way, and whatever environments we live in. Air pollution is a major cause of pollution. Particulate matter is very toxic to children.
Right.
So there's so many things that in our environment, but not to make ourselves nutty. If you can just change food and water to start, it really helps.
Right. Yeah. It is enough to, when you talk about those kinds of things, to make a lot of people just go stick their head in the sand and not want to do anything about it. Just say, I want to, just be ignorant. I don't want to know anything about that. But
yes, correct.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. We've all been there. We've all gone through this.
Yes.
It can be done. Lonnie has a question. She said, you mentioned that even being as scientific as possible in your book's presentation, MDs were not enthusiastic. I wonder how we will ever get our health insurance to include do no harm medicine. I watched Broken Brain episodes by Mark Hyman promoting functional medicine, integrative medicine. Are you aware of this recent release? Looking into this field for my husband's needs, I discovered most, if not all, do not accept health insurance as it is considered alternative medicine. How can we begin to have our health insurance cover holistic and nutritional medicine? Do you have any suggestions coming from the medical profession?
Yes. Well, gee, that's a tough one. I didn't watch Dr. Hyman's Brain series because of time, not because of interest. And I'm very pleased with Mark's work. He's awesome. I support what he does in IFM, Institute of Functional Medicine, wholeheartedly. So there are a few integrated clinics popping up, like Mark Hyman's. He has a Cleveland clinic. Here in Northern California, we Sutter Health has an integrative clinic where I used to work, and they take insurance. But that is definitely the exception, not the rule.
Right.
So unfortunately, for so many folks that need to go outside Western medicine a bit, you can find some doctors who are at least open to nutrition and having these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But chances are, by the time you find them, moms and dads know more than the doctors know, and which happens frequently.
Yeah.
If you can afford to pay for some of these providers outside of the Western system, and this is expensive because now you're paying to insurance and for providers, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, shouldn't have to.
Shouldn't have to do that, but naturopaths are a great way to go.
Right.
Now, if people can't get to a naturopath, or a naturopath is too expensive, here in the northern part of the U.S. and Northwest, naturopaths do take insurance in Oregon. So, but that's unusual, and that's not the rest of the U.S.
Right.
So, if you can find a holistic nutritionist, they often cost much less than doctors and naturopathic doctors and medical doctors, and they can really guide you in this journey, because sometimes, especially if you have a complex disorder or your child, like autoimmune disease, it's really hard to do this on your own. You need help.
Right.
You need help. So, or a health coach can help steer you also. And so these are some things that people you can work with who are perhaps more affordable. And then once you get on board, they can at least direct you to websites, good books, YouTubes, where you can start to pick up a lot on your own.
Right. Right.
It's going to change. It will change. The change is happening because people are sicker, and people are going outside the system to get help.
Right. And it's going to be, voting with your pocketbook. Once again, it's what we're going to have to do. It's like, we can't get our states to label genetically modified foods as such, but, the increase in organics is huge, so much that, Amazon just bought Whole Foods, right? That's got to be a driving factor in their purchase of Whole Foods. So, just keep voting with your pocketbook. I will say that if you have the ability to have a health savings account, you can at least put tax deferred dollars to work, so that depending what your tax bracket is, you could save 30-40% at least on the taxes, on the tax effect of that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it means putting aside the money to begin with, right? So that you can spend it later, but you can spend that on things like naturopaths and homeopaths and even supplements and whatever, as long as you document it for your tax purposes.
Correct.